How the May Beetle found his calling. Hehe. Once upon a time, in the month of May, a May Beetle named George came into the world. Like all bugs his age, George couldn't decide what he wanted to be when he grew up. He understood that he had to try everything that came to mind and then settle on what he liked. May Beetle George decided to start with the simplest thing, hopping on one leg. He hopped and hopped until a little bee named Mary flew up to him. "What are you doing?" she asked.
"I'm trying to find my calling in hopping on one leg," George said.
"And how it's going?"
"Not very well,"
sighed the May Beetle, stopping his hopping.
"It was fun at first, but now it's not so great and my leg is tired."
"Maybe you should try something creative," the bee suggested, "like sculpting a clay pot or playing the guitar."
"I'm afraid I don't have the patience for that."
The May Beetle shook his head.
"And who are you and what's your calling?"
"I'm a bee," Mary replied. "My calling is to gather nectar from flowers and make delicious sweet honey. Want to try doing this?"
"Let's go,"
George agreed, and off they flew to the field together. Mary leisurely fluttered around, scouting for the most attractive flowers and carefully collecting nectar in her pouches. Meanwhile, George dashed around like mad and almost knocked over his container with nectar a couple of times. In the end, Mary had filled all her reservoirs with nectar, while George had barely anything at the bottom of his container, and it smelled nothing like nectar. "What's this?" Mary sniffed the liquid George had gathered and wrinkled her nose.
"I don't know,"
the May Beetle shrugged.
"Is everything really that bad?"
"Yeah, not great," confirmed the bee. "Let's go find you another calling. Maybe we'll visit Butterfly Karina and you can try to be like her."
"Nah,"
George waved it off.
"You saw how I dart around. I'll never fly as gracefully as they do."
"Then let's go to Leaf Rolling Moth Tess," said the bee. Leaf Rolling Moth Tess showed May Beetle George how to roll leaves. When George tried, he spun the leaves so vigorously that he accidentally tore them apart.
"Looks like you have too much energy for this task."
Tess tried to compliment the bug somehow.
"You know what? Maybe the calling of a bark-boring beetle like Victor would suit your temperament?"
And all three of them headed to Victor. The bark-boring beetle showed George how to chew tree bark and make tunnels inside. The May Beetle tried, but all he managed to do was crash into tree trunks with acceleration.
"Yeah, typical May Beetle,"
noted Victor, watching George's attempts. When George ran out of steam, all the insects settled on a branch. George was feeling down. The others were thinking of how else they could help their friend find his calling. Suddenly, a swarm of insects buzzed past them with a deafening noise. Bee Mary, Leaf Rolling Moth Tess and Bark Boring Beetle Victor came alive and jumped from their seats with excitement.
"What's that?"
May Beetle George asked. "It's No Rules Meadow Races," Mary exclaimed. "Look, dragonflies, bugs, wasps and grasshoppers are participating, but May Beetles perform the best in them. They may not be the fastest, but they're tireless and fearlessly dive into collisions. Do you want to give it a try?"
"Absolutely,"
George nodded in awe.
"Of course I do."
And he registered for the next race and immediately won because he dashed through the entire track fiercely, pushing competitors aside with gusto. Thus, May Beetle George found his calling, along with friends and loyal fans.